Okay, Shalom. This is the introductory Shiur for the 11th Shiur that we're having on Birchas mitzvah, and this is going to finish us off with Parak Aleph of Hilchos Berachos. So the Rambam says as follows. He says as follows in source number 1. He's going to give three different dinim. So the first din he says, Kol davar shu minhag, af al pi shu minhag neviim hu. Okay, so anything that's a minhag, even though it's a minhag of the neviim, could go netilas arava b'shvi, like taking the aravos on Hoshana Rabbah in the Beis HaMikdash, right? We don't today. Obviously, we don't do that. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash, but we take the aravos on Hoshana Rabbah, we beat them, right? So they used to bring them and circle the mizbeach in the Beis HaMikdash with them. So today it's a minhag. And if it's neviim, if it's minhag neviim that we're talking about, so all the more so also a minhag of the chachamim. You're going kriyas halal Rosh Chodesh. Like reading halal on Rosh Chodesh is only a minhag chachamim. But b'chol shel moed shel Pesach, and also the halal on chol shel moed shel Pesach in mevarchin alav. So anything that's a minhag, we don't make a bracha. That's halacha number 1. V'chein kol davar sheyistatek lecha im talon bracha im lav, and also anything that you are not sure of if it gets a bracha or not. So then osin osabol bracha. So then you do that mitzvah without a bracha. Okay. And then the last thing he says is olam yizaher adam bebracha she'ina tzricha. Okay, and a person should always be careful about a bracha that he shouldn't make, right? That he doesn't need to make. The yarbe berachos tzrichos, and he should make many brachos that he does need to make. Okay, so he says right? So and there's based on a posuk of every single day I shall bless you as a pasuk in Tehillim. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows: Meisiv Rav Amram, Demai, Ma'arvin bo, Umishtafin bo, Umivarchin alav, Umizamin alav. Okay, so Demai is a type of vegetable. Like it's not a name of a vegetable. It's a type of category of vegetables in relation to giving trumas and maisos. We're not sure if you have to take trumas and maisos on it. So the Rambam says you can still make an eruv on it. You can still have partnerships with it, and you still make a bracha on it. And when you take like trumas and maisos, not when you eat it, and you're able to use it for zimun. Umafrishin also arum, and you can take truma from it when you're not dressed, when you're naked. Ubein hashmashos, and you can do it between days. Via mart kol min darban by bracha, and if you'll say, wait, hold on a second, every darban has a bracha. So wait a minute, so how is he able to make a bracha if he's not dressed? That's a halacha you're not allowed to do. This is habin and have mechanech kadeshuleka. Okay, Amar Abaye, v'adai de divrei by bracha. For sure, anything that's derabanan gets a bracha. Suffix de divrei, but if it's a suffix, for whether or not this is a chi of derabanan, right? We're not sure if this is obligatory from a rabbinic level. Low by bracha. So it's a suffix doesn't get a bracha, like we saw in the Rambam. V'ha Yom Tov Sheni. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, the whole idea of Yom Tov Sheni, when we keep a second day of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, right? So that's a suffix, right? That's suffix derabanan. That's a suffix derabanan. We make kiddush on Yom Tov Sheni. All the brachos that we normally make on a Yom Tov, we make on Yom Tov Sheni. So how's that? How can you say that that you don't make a bracha? So the Gemara answer is hasam ki hechi delal zuzul. So really, it shouldn't get a bracha. But if we didn't have any brachos in Yom Tov Sheni, so then people would say, oh, Yom Tov Sheni is not really that important. If it was so important, it would get brachos. So clearly, it's not that important. So therefore, we make you say brachos, even though really the Gemara is correct. You shouldn't make brachos on it. Okay. So Tosfos says. This is Tosfos not here, but in brachos. Tosfos says as follows. He says, right? So he says that when it comes to a minhag, like the Rambam says, you don't make a bracha on it. We don't make brachos on things that are minhag. But Rabbeinu Tam disagrees, and he says, tilto, when you move it, that's for sure not, you don't make a bracha. Fine, we get that. Aval, a mitzvah, but if it's something that's a mitzvah, pshita de mevarchin, the hachazinan, kol hayom yom tov sheni eno el minaga umevarchin, because we see from yom tov sheni you make a bracha. So how could you say? How could you say not? Okay, so no, so that's the okay. So you don't. So Tosfos says that you do make a bracha on a minhag. So our question is, what's the machlokes about whether you make a bracha on a minhag or not? Okay. We see the Ravid, right? The Ravid says as follows: Kol davar kasav Ravid. Nearly shelo amru el achol shel pesach dovad aval shel rosh chodesh with bracha tiknu kadei lefarsmo shel rosh chodesh. So it's true. Chol moed pesach minhag to say halal, we don't make a bracha, but rosh chodesh they made a bracha on halal on rosh chodesh in order to publicize the fact that it's rosh chodesh. Vanu minhaginu lebarach b'kulan, and we our minhag today, says the Ravid, is to make a bracha on all minhagim. Veinan limod me'arava lefi she'ein ba lo shevach lo dab v'netilasa. So he says, and we don't learn from the arava, which is a minhag, and we don't make a bracha on it, right? So he says, don't use that as an example for everything else. Like why? Because picking up the arava has no concept, it has no part to it. There's no factors of praising God or thanking God. Okay? Matzarach bebracha, right? And so why would you make a bracha on saying that the act itself is not praising God or thanking God? About kriyas halal biyoma kedushin akurba musaf behem and tiknu behen halal mishum heker lekedushasan yafel asum etzach bracha. But halal on Rosh Chodesh and halal on the Chol Moed and on Yom Tov, of course we should make a bracha on it, because then in that case that's we're showing that there's kedusha to it, right? And that like disagreeing with the Rambam, you need a bracha on it. So the Ravid seems to say the factor about whether you make a bracha on a minhag or not, which the Rambam rejected altogether, is whether or not the minhag itself, is an act of shevach, an act of praise, or a act of thanks to Hashem. So why, if a minhag has is praise, right, like halal, so then he gets a bracha. But if it's just a stam mitzvah, just a stam minhag, like the arava, then it doesn't. So that's an interesting factor. So we have to figure that out. Okay. The Rambam, so the Kesef Mishnah quotes some other opinions. The Kesef Mishnah says we're going to focus most importantly on the Ramban. So the Ramban says Das Rabbeinu lahashos chol shel moed pesach Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so he says the Rambam, the Kesef Mishnah says, he says Rosh Chodesh Pesach doesn't make a difference. None of these get a bracha on their halal because they're all minhag. Ramban cholik b'neim. The Ramban said chilik b'neim. He separates, he divides between the chol shel moed halal and Rosh Chodesh. The chol shel Pesach kevan dikru moed mechayim lemikra halal b'diluk. So he says no, on chol shel moed Pesach it's called in the Torah a moed. That's a chol hamoed. So therefore you have to say halal on it. Okay, say half halal, but you still make a halal and you still say a bracha. But gam Ravid mechalik and Rabbeinu Tam, okay, quotes the other opinions. Okay, so now the question we have on the Ramban is, right, the Ramban says that Pesach gets a halal on its, gets a bracha on its halal because it's a moed. So why is that factor now important? Why is the fact that it's a moed, does that get it a bracha? Okay. The Rambam, they're going on to, now we're going to talk about our second din, which was that when there's a suffix, whether or not you make a bracha on it, you don't make a bracha, right? First one was minhag. Now we're talking about a situation where I'm the supak, I'm in doubt whether I'm obligated in the mitzvah or not. So then the Rambam had said, if you're not sure if you're obligated, then you don't make a bracha. So says the Rambam, he says, Kol mevarach bracha she'ena tzricha, right? This is earlier in Parak Aleph. We didn't see this yet. Anybody that makes a bracha that's not necessary, hari nosa shem shamayim l'shav. So he's saying God's name in vain. The hari hu kin nishpa l'shav, and it's as if he's taking a false oath. Right, so that's which is nisa daraisa, which is so what's right? Interesting. Okay, it says and you can't even answer amen after that type of a bracha. Right, somebody just gets up and makes a shackle and he has nothing to drink or nothing in front of him. You're not allowed to answer amen to that bracha. Okay, but now my question is as follows: the Rambam seems to almost everybody understands this Rambam that says that if you're not sure whether or not you're obligated in the mitzvah, so that you shouldn't make the bracha. So almost everybody understands the reasoning behind the Rambam is because we have this concept of anything that's suffix darabanan l'kula. Anything that's suffix darabanan is l'kula, and anything that's suffix, whether you're going to say Hashem's name in vain, you should also go l'kula and not say Hashem's name in vain, so you don't violate the doraisa, right? So you skip the bracha out of fear of violating the doraisa. So my question is this halacha purely technical, that it's an external factor that comes in, right? Meaning that I have my obligation to make a bracha. So within Hilchos brachos, I should be making a bracha, but there's this external factor of saying God's name in vain, and it's a different mitzvah. But that superimposes itself here, and then out of fear, so I don't violate that halacha, then I have to make I don't make the bracha, right? That's one way of understanding it. That's how most of the world understands it. But I want to ask this question. Is there a reason maybe within the laws of brachos themselves, nothing to do with saying God's name in vain, that you wouldn't make the bracha in a case where you're in doubt whether you're obligated in the mitzvah itself? Okay. The Rambam had said that you should always be marbe, you should make as many brachos as you can in a situation where you are obligated to make the bracha, right? And he quoted this pasuk, that every single day I'm going to bless you, praise your name forever. So what's the idea of this pasuk, and how does it relate to reciting many brachos that you should recite? Okay, let's look at some sources that are just going to help us with a svara. So this is a tshuva of the Rambam. Now, what's interesting is that the Rambam has a lot of tshuvas. A lot of them are not authentic. Rav Kafach, who is an expert in the Rambam and the Rambam's handwriting, and so there's a group of the Rambam's responsa called the responsa to Chachmei Lunil. Lunil was a city in Europe, and evidently they, according to these, to the text that we have, they sent the Rambam about 30 questions, and he answered them, and they're called the Tshuvas the Chachmei Lunil. Rav Kafach feels they're all fake. The Rambam never wrote any of them. But okay, so we could either look at them as the Rambam's opinion or a rishon on the Rambam. Okay, this wasn't Joe Schmo writing these tshuvas. However, even if it was fake, it was somebody that knew what they were talking about explaining the Rambam. So listen to what the Rambam says here. The question that they asked the Rambam was as follows: Shela mashakasu parak shlishi ger shemo ad shalom nisgayer. Right. So we learned that a convert, right, doesn't make the bracha until after he converts. Okay, so you're in here, hello, suffix Torah, who about suffix darabanan, who delom varchim suffix doraisa varchim, chutz me'at mai. Okay, so he says, so what's they're basically asking him on the idea of suffix darabanan. Okay, so the Rambam answers suffix darabanan when we're not sure whether or not we should make a bracha because we're not sure whether we're obligated in the mitzvah or not, we don't make a bracha. So says the Rambam, Hadvarim you do it. Okay, it's well known. Shekol bracha shia mitzvah derabanan. He ben shetia mitzvah midivreim ben shetia min Torah. Chachamim hein shetiknu bracha. Right. So we all know that whether any single mitzvah, there's no mitzvah that the bracha is daraisa. The bracha is always derabanan. Whether or not the mitzvah itself is daraisa or it's derabanan, the bracha was always instituted by the chachamim. Hein shetiknu bracha. And they're the ones that said that anybody that makes a bracha that's not necessary violates lo sisa. So therefore, any single thing that we're in doubt whether or not we're commanded to do the bracha or not. So whether no matter what, if it's daraisa darabanan, if we're not sure whether or not we're obligated in this halacha, so then we should definitely not make the bracha. Kol davar sheninsa befer shacham shavarchan alav ben shahaya vadim midivrei can go ner Chanukah mikra Megillah ben shahaya safek midivrei can go yom tov sheni bevarchan alav. Okay, but anything that we see the chachamim say you need to make a bracha on, right? So if the chachamim say you need to make a bracha on, even if you're not sure if you should make a bracha, right? But if the chachamim say you should make a bracha on it, okay? So whether it's Megillah or Chanukah, right? So or Yom Tov Sheni, so then you make a bracha, okay? Because the chachamim said the fair you should make a bracha, okay? And if the v'davar shelo tiknu alav, and if the chachamim didn't make a bracha on it, right? So then ein mevarchan alav. If the chacham never said to make a bracha on this thing, then don't make a bracha on it. Chol mitzvah shikara min Torah. Now any bracha, any mitzvah who is daraisa. And we're not sure on a mitzvah daraisa if we're obligated to do the mitzvah or not. The chachamim didn't put a bracha in that situation. They were not mitaking a bracha in that situation. Even though it seems like it's from the Torah, so even if there's a case of an animal called a koi, which is some weird biological type of being, where we're not sure if after killing this thing we have to cover its blood, right? Covering the blood of an animal that we shech, that's a mitzvah daraisa, so we're not sure. Okay, so here, right? So then we have a bracha because the chacham said to make a bracha on it. But if the chacham say don't make a bracha, then we don't make a bracha. Okay, because the chachamim are the ones that set up the bracha. Okay, so that's the important thing. Okay. So now we have as follows. Here's the Radak. The Radak says on our posuk, this is the third thing the Radak says, Amar Chazal, B'chol yom v'yom, tein lo me'in berachos. And every, right, he quotes Chazal. We actually saw this Gemara. We're going to see the Gemara in 1 second again, but the Gemara says that every single day we give a bracha to what is necessary. The sun closes that pasuk, and where do we get it? From this pasuk, Baruch Hashem yom yom. So this is this next pasuk we see here. So it seems that Gemara is what the Radak is using to explain why it is that we should say brachos to Hashem every single day, right? This is the Rambam. If you remember this halacha, the Rambam says, we learned this together. If you have a lot of mitzvahs that you're about to do together, you don't like try to bundle them together and make one mitzvah and say one bracha on it. Rather, what do? You make each one separately, okay? And that's why this is the Gemara that we're talking about that the Radak had just brought up. The Radak says as follows. He says, if you have a lot of mitzvahs in front of you, right? So the Tanna Kama said that you make an ala mitzvahs, you do bundle them together. You don't remember beracha, call achas v'achas. You make a bracha on every single mitzvah by itself. Each mitzvah gets its own bracha. My time with Rabbi Yehuda. How do you explain Rabbi Yehuda? So he uses this pasuk. Baruch Hashem yom yom. What does that mean? Every single thing deserves its own bracha. That's the explanation that we have for our pasuk that the Rambam uses to explain that you should always say as many brachos as you can, as long as the brachos are necessary. If they're not necessary, then you shouldn't. Okay, that's the introductory shiur. I look forward to actually giving shiur on this topic. Be'ezras Hashem.